All right, good morning, everybody. This is the second or third, I guess, second official cluster API nested office hours. This video is going to be recorded, posted to YouTube later. We don't have the official, or I don't have access to the official SIG cluster lifecycle YouTube playlist, but we'll get these uploaded once that's actually granted. So don't say anything that you wouldn't want published all over the internet. And to kick it off, we only have one discussion topic, but I think it's going to be a big one that we can kind of dive deep into throughout the whole meeting. Cool. Faye, do you want to get started because you added this item and you want to just start the conversation? We can start adding issues and start talking through what we need to do as an architecture piece.
Yeah. Because I go through all the comments that the reviewer provide. I think why is the Mooner? Is he one of the TL from the class API? I think. He's a client maintainer. Okay. Anyway, first is naming. So nested. There is one proposal is change to hosted. So what do you guys think? I feel nested may not be. I mean, for the repo is probably okay, but for the entire CRD name, I'm not sure where that cause confusing.
Yeah, it might be kind of confusing to have nested as the name of the project and hosted as the name of the CRs, because you're going to be creating different things. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't basically have somebody go rename the repo. I don't think that would be a major pain, but if that's something that we want to do.
Well, because I think the repo nested is because if you change the repo to hosted, it's even problematic because we have some counterpart like provider, so like provider bootstrap, right? That is
right.
How do you compare that with hosted? So then nested stands alone as a repo name, so people know, oh, there is a clear difference here as a repo name. But for the CRD name, I don't know. Do you guys have other preference? Yeah, I don't really like the nested here because let me think. Nested, hosted. Yeah, I think hosted is better than local, at least, in my opinion.
I agree. I'm wondering what you're thinking about the actual object type. So you don't like it as in the actual CRs for a specific reason?
Yeah, I'm just for all the name, because think about it. So now we have a control plane, right? We have a control plane template. We have now Charles is working on 3 individual component controllers, and everything will start with a prefix, same prefix, either nested or something else. So I'm just thinking, for example, if for Charles, if we say nested API server, nested etcd, nested control plane, controller manager, would that name make sense? Or but if you say hosted API server, hosted etcd, I feel it's better. I don't know.
It's a good point. Okay, so you're thinking that hosted could potentially be actual object types. I feel like if we're going to do that, we should change both. So we'd have cluster API provider hosted and cluster API provider, and then each one of the types, because I believe they're supposed to be similar, but we can confirm with somebody from actual cluster or from like SIG cluster lifecycle or more a part of the leadership group for cluster API.
Really?
And see if they should. Look at like the AWS types. It's always AWS whatever. AWS managed control plane, AWS cluster. Let's look at some other ones.
Let's look at some examples. So let me see.
Let's see what we have for. Go down to the glossary. Oh, that's not going to actually help me. So if we look up provider / vSphere. Let's see if all of these are.
Yeah, okay, check it. So if there is a convention for that,
potentially not. CPI. I'm not sure what CPI is in this context. Let's see. We have, for cluster types, we have vSphere cluster type. They do have something different for control planes though, but I'm not sure what these are actually used for within the CAPV.
CPI, cloud provider, CPI vCenter. Is this vCenter? Okay.
Yeah, this is the vCenter provider. So that might make sense, but these actually aren't physical Go types, or I mean, aren't Kubernetes resource types, or at least it doesn't look like they come off as that. Virtual machine clone spec, interesting. vSphere machine type, vSphere machine template.
Yeah, for them, yeah.
Ones.
That's it. Yeah, they say vSphere instead of VMware. So, oh, it's
yeah. Well, also the provider's also vSphere.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I thought it was VMware.
So let's look at, say, I know AWS is. I'm going to switch to Azure.
Yeah.
See what their types are. Azure cluster. Azure cluster. Yeah, all of Azure's are all done with Azure in front of it. How about packet? Packet machine, packet cluster, packet machine type. So I think either way, we should pick one and go with it for all of them. In essence, just to keep with the same format. I'm not hard pressed on either direction. I think both of them make sense.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have a strong, because if we want to change repo name, I don't want to go through that again, because we already go through one round to come with that name. So I believe in that round, did you propose hosted or similar?
It wasn't in our list before, so they didn't actually have that. So I'm happy to pop that over to Tim and Vince and see if there's any objections to see if that's.
Yeah, if we don't have to be consistent, then it's kind of even higher level discussion. So it's just one to all. If Vince, if the class API guys thought, hosted is a better name, let's just switch to them and be consistent for everything that we add.
Okay, let's see, and then okay. Cool.
Okay, I think that's a very high level thing. Then I think, Chris, how about I just go through each? I believe there are only two major CRD that we need to go. The major ones. They got the most comments, right?
Yeah. So there's definitely there's some overarching things within the entire pull request, but there are a couple main ones in here. So we have namespace prefixing, calling out docs that they should be readable.
Yeah, how about let's just go through one by one, or let's just look at the nested control plane spec. Right?
Sure. You want me to actually open it and separately without comments and review it that way, or how do you want me to look at this?
Oh, okay. I'm looking at on my own Chrome, and it is okay.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah. Yeah. First, just look at this field, right? The class namespace. Yeah. So this one, the problem is they don't know the context, so they don't know exactly what is UID kind of thing, right?
Sure.
Another thing is length. I'm glad he noticed that we have a risk for the length part.
Right.
So
definitely.
So I think we should address both. First, I think this one at least, the comments need to explain the way that this is a very optional one. So usually people shouldn't set it.
So I think there's a couple stories in here that we could do. I want to make it so that we have something that out of the box it will work if you don't set it, but that you have the option to set it, and then it updates the status at the end so that we can key off status for the actual type instead of calling like a conversion function to try and generate the actual cluster prefixes. Specifically, I mean, for our use case, this is going to be really beneficial for us because we want to be able to maintain some level of consistency and determinism in the actual prefixing versus using those using the actual UID, the hash of the UID. We can actually plan for what those are going to be so that we can register those namespaces, for example, with other systems within how our architecture is set up. And so the idea there was if we can make it so that we could set those in our instance, and it's not going to break anything for downstream because we'd be keying off of something like the status field on the virtual cluster CR, since not the virtual cluster, the nested control plane CR, we'll have that loaded into every informer that we need to pull this from anyways. And so the idea would be key off this, be able to supply something. I wrote like again, this is like not the code here isn't meant to be merged or anything like that, but it was just to show what the model would be. The idea here would be we'd have an emission webhook to default it if it's not set for you. Okay,
I understand. So I think it is fairly okay to have this API, no problem. So, but I only have comments. I mean, I have some comments regards the comments of this field.
Sure.
So the comments of these fields, whatever you said is okay, because if you set it, you're on your risk. The problem is if you set it and if you don't manually do the dedupe things, you will have trouble if they are having the same name, right?
Totally.
So your own risk, it is okay. If you manage it, you take the risk. What I'm trying to say is that this field, normally system will give you one, and the system already handle two problems. One is dupe name problem. Second is length problem. So we already truncated our length to 64. But if you don't, if you input your own, put the length over 64, then you have your own problem, right? So that's the thing. If you don't set it, the system will take care of it. But if you set it, you will take your own risk. This is my point.
Yeah. And we can definitely call that out. So we need to call it that this is typically defaulted. It needs to have a max length validation and warnings about its usage for conflicting namespaces, prefixes.
Yeah, another is change the field name from class namespace to namespace prefix. I think it's okay.
Okay, we need to call this out. Okay, and then we'll call this also rename to, I apologize for having to listen to my smashing keyboard over here.
Did you write it down? I think you should. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. Okay. Next one.
Cluster domain. We probably need to have. Oh, yep. We just need to have the optional flags. Yeah. Since it's set to omit empty, anyways.
This is reasonable. Yeah, template ref. So this one.
Is that correct? I tried to explain. That is what I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, you got that right.
I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of this will get solved if we have something like a design doc that's just out of the box. So so I'm trying to think of how we can do this in a reasonable fashion to make this work well for everybody. I think we can continue to review these, but it's very pointed feedback towards that. I don't know if it's actually necessary because I think we probably need to take a step back to talk about general architecture of this so that we can have a doc that other people can understand, so that when we get reviews like this, or when we get James Munnelly reviewing and other folks, that we can refer back to what the real goals are of the project, because I think that's missing for some people.
I agree. I totally agree. But since we don't have the document yet, I think today let's just go through some apparently fixable API changes.
So I want to actually take a step back, because I started to do this just lightly. I'm not trying to. Well, here. Anyways, I'm just going to open this up over here. So I've done this locally a little bit, which is basically just the base CAPN architecture that we're talking about here. And so I started to write up this. I have not pushed this anywhere, but I wanted to give. I wanted to kind of, if we can take it back and talk about goals of the project, non-goals, and then let's write out user stories. I can push all these things up into an actual issue, not this doc, because I don't need to publish this yet, but at least we'll have something that we can all add things into, user stories, so that we can start building against something. And my specific callouts here are these sections. And if you can't read that, I can make, well, actually these sections, and we can make that bigger if we need to. Because it'll help ground some of the stories for folks.
Okay, I think that's okay. You can. I think we should collaborate on this. I can add something.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. And so what I'd love to do is I'm going to actually go through and just move this over, because this is just going to be creating a new issue. And what I'm thinking is that I can just copy over some like high level goals here. I'm just going to do this. So I'd like to do high level CAPN goals and prelim goals. So copying these things over, because I don't need this to be in Markdown just yet. Let's make those bullets. And this gives us at least a prelim non-goals. We should at least have this documented elsewhere. And I'd love for all of you to be able to go through and add more into this. Just add comments on this issue. I'll drop the link in here. Because I think we need to make sure we set the grounding for everybody. Do you all agree, or does that seem too?
Yes, I think that's okay.
Cool. Cool. Goals issue, and I'm going to take out that period because it doesn't need to be there. And then I want to have a section all on user stories, because I think there's probably a lot more here that I'm not actually covering. So let's do a Wei, what's your GitHub handle? Is it just
You are mute.
Independent skill.
Yeah, WEILING 61.
61?
61, yeah.
Okay, cool. And then we doing the same for this. And well, here we're going to do user stories. So if we can get out some solid user stories in here, it doesn't have to be on this phone call if we don't want to, but at least nailing out what the goals are of the project will be super useful. Please add more. And then I'm going to make another issue, which is we need to have the high level in that part. All right, so this is, we need to create a new proposal document from docs proposals template. I'm going to say, so I'm going to, well, what do you think about this this doc not covering the actual low level objects? I'm just thinking that this is going to be what CapN is and how it's going to be built. And then Chow, I know you were starting to work on the actual types, the actual custom resources for these objects. If we can have another doc that outlines each individual object, either one doc per, or have like the overarching what the actual control plane endpoints or control plane types look like, I think that would be really good, because at least then we'll have architecture and goals, and then we'll have something that's encompassing this is how we're going to fulfill those actual goals and user stories with these types. Yeah, how does that sound to you?
So so I am writing another documentation because I went through the whole like working process of how to provision each component for a control plane with Faye last week, and I'm writing a documentation right now. Awesome. But my documentation is more like how all these three subcomponents, subcontrollers, nested API server controller, nested etcd controller, nested controller manager controller cooperate with each other, and what we need from the control manager controller. So I'm writing this specific documentation. I'm not sure
Awesome.
if
that is exactly what I'm looking for.
What you are looking for. Okay, yeah.
Yep.
So I think I'm almost down, but I'm not quite familiar with the template that you just updated. So I don't know how to put it into the user story, or they require a lot of sections like the test or security model, things like that. I may maybe just omit the sections for now, but I think I have finished most of the major parts. And I think when I writing the documentation, I think we should do some change on our API on the in the pull request. Actually, it's just something like we need to add some field to some specific CRD. Like we need to, for example, if we have something like nested KAS, nested API server CRD, then inside the CRD, we need to store the name of the nested PKI or something like that. And I also find out that when we actually start creating each component, we need some information from the nested controller manager controller. Is that nested control plane controller? Like the nested control plane controller need to create the CR, each CR for the subcontrollers, and it need to create the PKI, and it need to create something like the root namespace or the cluster namespace, and store all these things. I just go through all this, like the process, how we do this, and yeah, that is what I am writing.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic. So I've just made this, add more information into this as you need or as you want. But this is at least what I think you're working on then. If that makes sense. I just covered the basics of this is how all the nested types are going to work together.
Right.
But you can probably add a little bit more information about that. Cool. I think that's great. So that would mean that Faye, you and I can collaborate on the actual high level architecture for what it's going to look like, of just like how this is going to function generically, and then Chow, yours is gonna deep dive into the individual resource types and how those actually work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
So I have some questions. So when you open the first issue, I noticed that you said we are not going to take in charge of the etcd, right? Well, I'm not sure what does that mean. Does that mean we do need to create the etcd pods or workloads for the nested etcd? We will make the nested etcd just an interface and add the etcd operator or other third-party controller to do all the heavy lift, or we are going to implement something like a basic native way to create the etcd pod or things like that?
Yeah. So you're specifically talking about this one, right?
Right,
I'm
correct.
assuming?
Mhm.
Yeah. So my theory, my call out there is that we should have something built in. Absolutely have something built in. Something that just works and provisions, and that people can start to work with CapN without doing anything new. The minus etcd is more that we could that for upgrading and things like that. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, and we should be planning for folks to actually not use that. For the most part, like in a production system, I wouldn't expect people to use what we build into this, is my guess. So we should have something that works as a use case, but expect that people are going to deploy an operator or something like that that has been pre-written, that has all of those controls in place.
Okay. So,
but we don't have to do that. I mean, if we want to talk about putting that as part of the work items as well, to build that, we can. I'm just expecting that could be an easy add-on later, if we make it pluggable at the beginning.
okay, I see. So
for etcd, we probably don't need to worry about upgrade at this moment. But for other two components, the controller need to take care of the upgrade.
Yeah.
I see. So I know it's maybe a little bit too early to talk about it, but since you said we wanted to have a pluggable nested etcd, does that mean when we're doing the first implementation, we wanted to have something just define an interface and have this version first implementation work with maybe the etcd operator, instead of we write a new operator or controller from the scratch?
I think the first version, we just use our what do we do now? Just the in-memory etcd.
Oh, okay.
That's it.
Yeah, start there, and then we can work to make it pluggable after. Yeah, and then from once we have it pluggable, then we can explain, oh, if you're going to use the improbable etcd operator, you do it this way, and you have to deploy maybe this extra controller that does some collaboration between CapN and that operator. And oh, if you're going to use the CoreOS one that's deprecated, it would look like this, and this is what you need to implement. But first state, we should at least have something built in that's using the stateful set that we have in virtual cluster.
Yeah. So the idea is I think we discussed last week. The idea is when we design the etcd CRD, we should be prepared in the future that etcd is not created by us. It is created by you create another CR, some other operator react on that CR, give you etcd. Then think about it. If we do that way, what information that we need to store in this etcd CRD to give to the nested control plane? So that's all we need to think about it. So for the implementation, the first one, you just follow the whatever API that we design, just create an in-memory etcd. That's it.
Yeah, so that we don't. Well, is there any chance that outside of this meeting or right now, Chao, you can actually add those notes in just as a comment on this, so that people coming in and reading this will understand what we just talked about?
Yeah, sure. So cool. Just to be clear, so we wanted to have something like still have a basic in-memory etcd control or something like that, but it will also be pluggable to popular etcd operator like the CoreOS one, something like that, right? Okay.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, in the first version, we just probably just API-wise just don't give you anything for the pluggable thing, because that needs more discussion. In the first version, we just do the provisioning. That's it. There was no API at all. So next, if you do the plugin, then we discuss the new API, add some field to say, if you want to use etcd operator, what are the fields that you need to specify in this CRD, something like that. And let's do it later.
Yeah. And it can also be potentially even like when we get to that, it can be something as well where you just you pass a flag or set up something on a config file that says, don't use this etcd controller. Just turn it off entirely. And then whenever the object is created, we have some out of band controller that's creating those things. And there's a lot of ways that we can do the pluggable stuff. So yeah, so build it in just out of the box. Yeah, I think that's the right way of doing it.
Yeah, I think that's good. So now we have a structure kind of documentation. Let's try to fill all of them. Yeah, I think for the high level, my understanding is for the high level architecture, one important thing is just go through all the exactly workflow, because this is kind of a complicated workflow. You know what I'm saying? The workflow is that I don't know what's the right figure to do that. We have some figure internally, give it a kind of life cycle span of each object. Once you create this controller will create another object.
Right.
So I feel that figure will help people to understand what exactly we are trying to do. Because honestly, this part of work is hidden by all the other providers because they do that their own way. Nobody knows how they do this. So, but we need to expose in the clear way. This is the way how we, start up all the components in the right way. I mean, either in the right sequence or whatever. So this is the way that we bring up everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I think as we have, so, okay.
So I'm going to like create a PR and upload the documentation, but just a PR, and I will link it to the issue. Is that okay, or I should put the whole documentation? Okay, great.
No, yeah, make an issue, and then I think you can just set it as a draft if you're not ready for it to be merged or anything like that. Like if I recall correctly, that's what this is. If it loads, yeah, you can set it as like an actual draft, so it won't actually get merged. And then we can do like do not work, like a whip flat label and so on and so forth, like we typically do with Prow.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So Faye, you and I can work on the base architecture stuff. I'll push this up just so we can start talking about it. I'm trying to figure out the best way because we need to collaborate on this. Maybe we do have to drop back to Google Docs just to do like back and forth on it.
I think Google Doc may be better, especially.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll take what I wrote up and put it into a Google Doc and link to that from the issue outside of this meeting. I
think let's just focus on just exactly, the basic, how many CRDs or total, all the CRDs that we want to create and the workflow, which is a major work controller that control everything else. So
okay.
We just focus on that, figure explanation. So that's our very important one. So then people will know what we are doing, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. So I'll ask about the hosted versus nested. I'm just going to pull this out, put this down here. We've got Chow. You're working on. You are working on the object type or the actual resource proposal. Okay. Great. And Wei, you've been doing a lot of stuff on the Syncer on our side of things. If you're interested in picking up and working on any of these things, reach out. We can all figure out how that will work too.
Sure. Sure. I will take a look first. Yeah.
I think we can add the user stories, at least for Apple use cases. But all your user stories, that is real user stories in your side. We can put some that as well, but since we don't use this approach, we use a slightly different approach in our side. But I think I can create one or two at least.
That'd be great.
I'm not talking about the Syncer. I'm talking about the one that we are creating. Class API.
CAPN.
Capping things. We need to have some use case around that. I think, but I believe that overall we can have one use case saying that we have a multi-tenancy requirement. So every tenant needs a cluster. So that's a very basic one, right? We should highlight some exactly why we need to use it.
Yeah. I think the only thing that's close to that is number 4 on this list, which is just I want to be able to, as a developer, I want to be able to use control plane level resources without conflicting with another control plane, but it doesn't talk about the actual multi-tenancy aspects. I had written a little bit of that into the motivation and summary on this doc that I had just started, just to kind of like jot down ideas.
Yeah, I think we don't spend too much on multi-tenancy, but we can add one, but which is a pretty valuable as a class administrator, right? I get a request from the developer. They want the isolated environments to do their testing. So, or as a cluster administrator, I need to provide isolated environments for my developers. I feel give them a dedicated in a KP cluster will ease my work because I don't need to worry about who kills another body or who is supposed to something else. This kind of thing.
Perfect. Yeah, that's agreed. Okay, so we need to add a multi-tenancy, like at least a story about multi-tenancy use cases. Cool.
Yeah, somewhere.
Cool. All right, Xiao, do you have anything? Do you want to actually show what you've been working on so far, or wait until you push that up and we can talk about it over in issues? I can give you access to share your screen if you're ready for that.
I see.
Chris, how about we still go through the API the proposal that you have rewritten? Let's go through all the comments on that. Let's just make agreements. Then overall, I don't think we need to do fundamental changes because let's make some agreement for some of the comments, right? Yeah, class domains, template ref. I believe just saying I think someone just complained about the name. So template ref may not be a good name.
So also the template ref will actually be just the pod template spec or
no. I think this template is control plane template.
Oh, I see. This one will refer to the control plane template.
Yeah.
And inside the control plane templates, we will define a pod template of each component, right?
Correct. So
okay.
Yeah, so it references a nested control plane template. I wonder if there's a way, and this is something that I don't know the best answer here. So I'd love to have like an open dialogue about what we all believe is the right way. So in this example, this template ref refers to, like you point out here, it refers to this nested control plane resource. Find the actual type. There it is. So it refers to this, which uses these config add-ons. I know we already had comments in here. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead a couple comments, but this type is interesting in that it points to a manifest. So it either points to a raw Kubernetes manifest or a customized based manifest. Yeah. I don't know if that's the best option here because there's potentially other ways of doing this. So if you look at what we're doing in cluster resource set, I don't know if you all had a chance to actually look at that object yet, but if you look at what's done in cluster resource set, it's very similar using a resource ref. And the resource ref actually refers to, as you'll see here, it refers to a config map or a secret. So there's the potential of doing this a little bit differently. So in here, in this example, we're using the config add-ons stuff, which comes from here. And that looks like this. And that looks like this, where it's referring to files on disk, in essence, or remote files in a repository somewhere, or an HTTP endpoint. Versus this, where we could technically do the template, we could do this referring to like an object somewhere within the cluster, and you could say that when you deploy this, you provide manifest files for each one and refer to them the same way that we do in the cluster resource set.
I think so. In my opinion, I feel that the resource set, because they need to, let me put it this way. So that is more flexible because the resource type can have many more. Who knows, right?
Yep.
But in our case, we probably only limited to 3 kind of pods: API server, controller manager, etc. So we have a limited set of objects to handle. So I prefer the as-on part because give a URL, give all the templates, because which means the number of templates we have is kind of limited. It's not very unlimited, right? Because we only have 3. Each one you can grow the template version, but again, we only have 3. So I feel it's still manageable to have this add-on thing. I was discussing, so this more looks like we have an add-on thing. We give all the template somewhere, for example, in our GitHub, right? I believe in each version, we can provide one template. That's most likely is the case. 1.116 have one, right? For each 3. So there won't be too many template files we need to manage. So we don't want to need to worry about the explosion of all the files.
Sure.
This is my understanding. If you do that way, in our Bootstrap script, we need to create all those objects somehow.
Right.
There's no such objects existing in a clean cluster. You have to do that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the alternative there is you could have each one of those objects. Each one of those objects could be something that we have. So when you do something like clusterctl init and it generates all of the files for you based on the provider, we could in theory make it so that it generates all of the different templates for you as config maps or secrets. It's most likely going to be config maps, but as config maps locally that you then just apply. So we automate the management of creating those resources. I'm not sure if that solves the problem, though. I think you're right that this does at least give a single entry point.
Yeah. Another thing is we need to be very, as we discussed before, we want to make this template immutable. We don't want people mute everything. Object is kind of too flexible. If you change the content, you don't know you can change the content. You have to write another controller to prevent people to change those content.
Yep.
But
yeah,
for the URL base is better, right? You can just give read permission. No one can change it.
Except for if it's a URL or a local file path, then the files under the hood could technically change. Somebody could mount a new volume in there and change what the contents of those files under the hood, which I guess would be
They do, but at least in our sample YAML, if you customize your YAML, you can do whatever you want. But
sure,
our building version is at least a building version is pointed to a kind of fixed place, fixed kind of template that we are thinking good to start with.
Yeah, no, I like that. Okay, that's a good path.
So if a user wanted to change some configuration of the component, say it wanted to add a new command line option for the control plan, for the control manager, then it can use the clusterctl first to generate the templates and then manually change the controller manager templates and then apply it to the cluster. We have some corresponding config map, and then this components list. These components will refer to this config map and create actually control plan for us, right? Is that the right process, the correct process?
No, I think what I was thinking is if you, if you look at Azure, it's just a URL path. If you want to, throw away what we provide the default and you want to create your own, you just change the URL path to your own. That's it.
Oh, okay. I see.
This
add-on is only something like a URL will point to a default or something else.
Yeah. The URL points to a default pod YAML kind of thing.
Okay.
I wonder, would it be beneficial to, if we took a step back and thought about the templating in general, is that the right path to have a built-in template, or should nested control plane, nested etcd, nested API server, and nested controller manager, should those just contain what is going to be paved, and you can technically just, like, from a more declarative route, not a dynamic based on a template, use every single time you deploy a control plane, you could supply the configurations for that control plane. Now, however you use that in your implementation, you could be using a standard set and it doesn't matter. And then we get rid of the template, but your actual CRs that we're truly creating behind the scenes have all the information about what's supposed to be provisioned. So if nested etcd had all of the parameters that you could potentially pass in, for example, it could technically contain a pod template. Would that make it easier for us to do this, or is that make it too is it too much of a concern that you could have one cluster have this configuration and a completely another cluster have this configuration, and there's drift between every single environment at that point? I know we've talked about this in the past, and I'm just trying to open up the question again.
So based on my understanding, so I think I discussed with Charles again. So the way that we have this template is that we have a single place to configure everything.
Yep.
So then the consequence is that every individual controllers, once they want to know exactly what are the pod template I'm going to create, I need to look back, first find the next control plane template and check exactly the components as on URL gets a YAML and gets object, right? So that's a workflow that I think Charles we discussed. This is currently how it does. We need to have reverse link to the template for every controller, for every new CR, right? So in a centralized place, the good thing is you can have a place to you can have a place to change the version to the upgrade as a whole. Basically, if you change the template, which means if there is a control plane and you change the template, which means the control plane needs to be upgraded. We have a central place to control the upgrade path. Otherwise, so think about the upgrade path, right? If you let individual CRD to, you just pass the version. So what would be the upgrade path in that regard?
I'm thinking that if you did it so that you had individualized CRs for each resource, you could individually update one component of it and not have to manage, like you as a human could update the API server, and then you as a human could 2 minutes later update controller manager after it's up to date. And then we can build automation around that after the fact.
I understand.
That's the only thing that I'm thinking there.
Yeah, but I think that approach has a problem. Is if different components can be upgraded differently, they may not work together, right? But the template is a good thing. Is whatever we put in the template is a set of configuration that we at least
that we validated.
Yeah. It works. Even upgrade is you have to bump. Maybe you need to bump up all the versions you want to make it work. If you bump individual versions, it may not work. So that's the reason I still like, as you pretty much take that template as a, whole cluster version. If you treat everything as a cluster bundle. It's kind of cluster bundle version kind of thing.
I wonder, sorry, I'm going back and forth between muting so you don't have to hear me typing. I wonder though, now if we, again, I'm not for or against, I'm just trying to talk out the potential ideas here. So if we made it generic that this technically could be, sorry, we just had somebody drop into the chat for a second, or into the call for a second. If we did it where you had individualized components, and say for instance, the virtual control plane had references for each one of those. Say for instance, in the virtual control plane CR, you had an object ref for the API server, you had an object ref for the controller manager, and you had an object ref for the etcd CR, the nested resources of those. And that managed as our template for each control plane, and it could point to different templates and update itself under the hood. would that do a similar function for you? You know that this control plane is now stamped as this, and you can guarantee that these versions work together because they're being deployed. But then you're outside of CAPN tooling is what's doing the true validation that these 3 CRs work together. And so it's not built into CR to do the validation of the control plane, but built in, but it's something you do out of the provisioning lifecycle. I don't know if that's better or worse.
I think let's just take the operational point of view. So if people indeed has request to do individual upgrades, maybe each CRD has a version, maybe better. But if we agree we do cluster-wise upgrade, most likely, I feel a central place describe the cluster version is better. This is my understanding.
So are we planning to open an option like the kubeadmin did? Like they allow user to, even though they are just like the large version, like say if we want to just have the 1.16 and then it have a default version, but if we wanted to change some configuration of the KCM, the controller manager, then we can change the configuration. When we start the kubeadmin, we can pass in a configuration and say, I wanted to have this command line option. And then this change will be applied to our default templates. So I'm thinking about, can we have something like still, we have a default add-on or refer to an URL, a default template, but we open up fields like a patch YAML or something like that, then user can put in their things they wanted to patch. When we create a new controller plan or any components, we first use the default template. Then we apply the user's patch YAML onto our default templates. Then we can work with the default version. We can have the user to specify their customized options. We can do both, right? And if we wanted to upgrade, say if a user wanted to upgrade, they just need to upgrade. They just need to update the patch YAML, the fields, and say we wanted to use a new image. The image is like maybe 1.17. And since this CRD has been updated, then the controller, the reconciler can still notice that, okay, this CRD has been updated. Then we can just update the components user just update it. Will that make more sense?
I think that's a good idea. I think it's definitely interesting for sure.
Well,
and something we should.
Tom, my point is, unless you do this a lot, which means unless people really want to have an individual patch, you will see thousands of individual patches that may okay to give a flexible interface. Otherwise, if you only have 1 or 2 patches, why not just create 1 or 2 more templates? So that's all about it.
Yes.
That's an interesting way of approaching it too. Yeah.
So
you could just have more templates or you have potentially like snowflake control planes that you're then dealing with because they have all these patches on them. And if you upgrade the underlying template for, say, for instance, like if somebody went in and upgraded 1.16 template and it tried to reconcile those and the patches failed, then we'd have to figure out how to deal with those failures.
I still like the template thing is that first, indeed, we shouldn't have too many templates in practice. Mm-hmm. Who's going to create those many templates? I mean, I think I asked Chris in the first beginning, are you going to satisfy every request from developer? Probably no. You probably just want to satisfy 1 or 2. I mean, you probably create 1 or 2 templates. That's it. I mean, if your total number of templates is limited this way, first, make it simple. Second, you have a consistent view. So it's easy to check exactly, what the current cluster look like, right? So my suggestion is let's start with simple. And if we do have requests to make it really flexible, redesign API to satisfy that.
Okay. I'm going to just highlight this. This is the most simple to build at first. We can.
I have one question so who will maintain this template? So building this template also have risk, correct? You can not always successful. So who will give this template?
So it is a class administrator, right? Whoever provides, CAPI to the developer, he needs to first give a version. This version is the validated version, and I'm pretty sure it works.
Yeah, so how he can make sure it works? He also need to replace some of the component and make sure it works. Then he produce template. So he also have to take a risk at first to try one version.
Luckily, they can just create another cluster with that, and they can just do it out of band. Sorry, Chip.
He can start with whatever the Kubernetes recommends. We have a, you know what I'm saying? So I think Kubernetes have a kind of, I don't know exactly they have a pod spec for that, but at least. Okay.
I think we could pull what's in KubeADM because you can deploy those as static pods. So we could technically pull the configs from KubeADM from the first for the first definition of it.
Yeah, just grab some, use your way, grab official builds, official Kubernetes which is running, and find out all the pod templates if you want to just correspond. Maybe later we can think about have a script for that. But in the very beginning, at least for 116, 118, even 119, we as a developer, we four guys can provide that template. I think we should be confident about what we are doing.
Just like what we have with the current cluster version, where it supports. Yeah.
It's just what Charles has been trying, running something, no problem, just go with it.
Yeah, we've been doing that as that exact same thing. We potentially have noticed some interesting stuff with the Syncer and 118 because of endpoint slices that we should talk about at some point. But that's more VC specific stuff. So real quick, just a time check. We're at 11. I believe we technically have the maybe not.
Not today, right? Last week.
You're right, not today. Okay. We're at time. If you all want to continue, we can, or we can continue this conversation over Slack.
I think let's just end this moment. Let's just make the meeting finish on time. So I think we have plenty of things to do. I think we can discuss API-wise. I guess we are most likely agree that we should stick to whatever we have now for the first for the first version. Because it is simple. I feel it is simple.
Agreed. No, what we do have right now is really simple, and it will work really well just to get this kick-started. And then we can continue. We can extend from there after we implement it in the new types.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah, let's go with. I mean, in this week, let's work on the documents, and we can pull out individual CRD. If you want to discuss more, Chris, we can just. Again, goes to all the comments that people give. I think we'll probably only have one or two left. But I guess the naming one is the most critical one.
Yeah.
It affects. Some other parts is pretty, some fields I think, for example, this ready one, I just think we need to change the name. Don't call it ready, just give some other names. Say provisioning done or something like that. Or it is okay.
I believe ready is something from Cappy though.
Okay.
I think it's actually we can use ready, because if we are going to use something like stateful set deployment, we can use something like readiness probe to make sure this component is ready. Then we monitor this stateful set status. Then we can say, okay, this component is ready because we have already probed these things. I mean, we can change the words, but I think this mechanism should work. Like we set the status.
Yeah, but if we copy from the CAPI convention, we can use ready.
Yeah, so this is from the control plane types. So required status fields include ready and initialized, and then we have the rest of it for what we're going to use if we're going to have replicas and so on and so forth. So I guess technically we need to reevaluate, because I only used the top one. But if we're going to be using replicas of everything, we probably need to be doing ready replicas.
Something like that.
I'm going to drop this link into that PR, because that's probably.
Yeah, I didn't know that they have already defined all this stuff.
They should.
Yeah, a lot of this is in place.
So like the AWS or other cloud provider, when they implement a cluster API, they use all these fields, or
yep,
they do some customization. Okay.
yeah, this is kind of okay. Yeah.
Cool. We're going to use conditions. Yes, we're definitely going to use conditions. I'll be honest, I was having some issues at just even including conditions because it was screwing some stuff up with the imports. I believe it was because I pulled some of the because I was vendor Kubernetes. So the vendoring of Kubernetes was causing issues by trying to also vendor in CAPI's types, which is why I pushed this out.
We should have conditions for sure. Yeah.
Yields from CAPI. I'm just going to do this and link off to here. So yeah, so cluster and control plane both have at least some set of things that are required for them to be defined on, or to have defined on them. We should be reviewing and making sure that we conform to those, because that's going to be what allows us to use the other CAPI features like the health checking and cluster resource set, because it's going to check to see if ready is set, and if ready set, then it's going to be able to continue on forward. So, all right. Well, I'm going to call this meeting. This has been really useful. I'm super stoked about this. Thanks everybody for joining. And eventually I'll get this posted to YouTube once I figure that out. I will also go talk with Timmons and folks to figure out what they all think about potentially doing hosted instead. If they're good with it, is that something that you all want to do as well? Switch it up to hosted? Or would you rather keep it as nested?
I really prefer hosted, but just because this is a term that I use so often, may confuse people. Nested standalone is a kind of a rare term. I mean, in this area, at least the people know there is a difference compared with the others.
Yeah, I wonder if it would confuse people to see a nested control plane, or I mean a hosted control plane, and think that means that it'd be backed by some hosting provider. That would be my one concern about being hosted is if somebody thinks, oh, this now means that EKS and AKS and DigitalOcean's provider, they're meant to now be implemented in this hosted provider implementation, then I think that's a bad idea. But cool.
Yeah, naming is kind of hard. I mean,
it is.
If I was thinking, repo use nested, but CRD use another name. But if you think they have to be consistent, I'm okay. Just stick to nested. I mean, it's just once people get used to it, and people get used to it. So.
Yeah. Also, once we set the base architecture, I'm sure people are confused by what this project is doing, because nobody's really seen. I mean, I'm sure people haven't gone back and actually reviewed all the docs that I linked in Slack about the original design for virtual cluster and like what this project does. So I'm sure there's just a lot of confusion, and we can just iron that out with docs. So.
Yeah, I don't have a strong for nested. I mean, just that's a valid concept anyway. Okay.
Cool. I'll talk with them and see if they have the same concerns, and we'll discuss back in Slack what the feedback is.
Sure. Okay.
Cool. Thanks everybody. Appreciate everybody joining. See y'all next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.